old age does not become happy by accident. It is not something that suddenly appears when work ends or when responsibilities slow down. For many people, old remember later years are filled with silent disappointments, unspoken regrets, and a quiet sense of fear about time passing too quickly. The body grows weaker, the world changes faster, and familiar roles slowly fade away. In such moments, comfort does not come from money, status, or memories alone. It comes from the inner structure a person has built throughout life. Immanuel Kant believed that true happiness, especially in old age, is not based on pleasure or external success. He argued that a good life is one guided by reason, moral clarity, and self-respect. According to Kant, when a person lives without clear principles, old age becomes heavy. The mind revisits past choices again and again, searching for justification or forgiveness. But when life has been lived with intention and integrity, old age becomes lighter, calmer, and more meaningful. Many people assume happiness in old age means comfort, entertainment, or being free from problems. Kant challenged this idea. He believed happiness without inner order is unstable. Pleasure fades quickly, but character remains. What truly supports a peaceful old age is not what you owned, but how you lived. Not what you achieved, but who you became through your choices. Kant's philosophy is especially powerful because it respects human dignity at every stage of life. He did not see old age as a decline into uselessness. He saw it as a time when wisdom could finally rise above desire, a time when a person could step back from ambition and see life clearly without illusions. But this clarity only comes if the foundation has been built early and strengthened over time. In this video, we will explore 4 pillars drawn from Immanuel Kant's thinking that can transform the experience of aging. These pillars are not techniques or shortcuts. They are lifelong attitudes. They shape how you think, how you act, and how you relate to yourself. When practiced consistently, they protect the mind from regret, bitterness, and fear. Old age, in Kant's view, is not meant to be chased for happiness. It is meant to reveal it. If a person has lived with honesty, discipline, reason, and a sense of inner worth, old age becomes a season of quiet fulfillment. It becomes a time when life no longer needs to prove anything. Instead, it simply rests in what it is. This is why understanding these 4 pillars matters. They do not promise comfort without effort. They offer something stronger, a mind at peace, a conscience at rest, and a dignity that time itself cannot take away. The first pillar, moral integrity. Immanuel Kant believed that moral integrity is the foundation of a meaningful human life. For him, morality was not about social approval, religious reward, or fear of punishment. It was about acting in a way that allows a person to respect themselves. Moral integrity means choosing what is right because it is right, even when no one is watching, and even when it comes at a personal cost. Kant argued that every human being carries an inner moral law. This law is not imposed from the outside. It speaks quietly through conscience and reason. When a person repeatedly ignores this inner voice, they may gain short-term advantage, but they lose something far more important. They lose inner unity. Over time, this loss creates tension in the mind, and that tension often becomes most visible in old age. As the noise of life fades, the mind naturally turns inward. In old age, distractions weaken. There is more silence, more memory, and more reflection. This is where moral integrity shows its true power. A person who has lived honestly does not need to defend their past. They do not feel the urge to rewrite their story. Their memories may include mistakes, but they are not haunted by them because their intentions were sincere and their actions guided by principle. Kant believed that guilt is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry into old age. It drains peace more than physical weakness ever could. Moral integrity acts as a shield against this burden. When a person has made a habit of choosing duty over convenience, their conscience remains calm. This calmness becomes a quiet source of happiness that does not depend on circumstances. Importantly, Kant did not believe moral integrity requires perfection. He understood that humans are flawed. What mattered was effort and intention. To act with integrity is to consistently return to what is right, even after failure. This ongoing commitment builds inner strength. Over time, it forms a stable character that does not collapse under regret. In old age, when a person can no longer change the past, moral integrity becomes especially valuable. It allows acceptance. It allows forgiveness of oneself. A morally grounded person can look back and say, I may not have lived perfectly, but I lived honestly. That statement alone brings deep peace. According to Kant, this peace is not emotional excitement or pleasure, it is dignity. It is the satisfaction of knowing that one's life was not ruled by impulse or fear, but by reason and responsibility. Moral integrity, then, is not just the first pillar of a happy old age. It is the quiet foundation that supports all the others. How moral integrity brings peace in old age. As people grow older, life naturally becomes quieter. The rush of building a career slows down, social roles begin to fade, external validation becomes less frequent. In this quieter stage of life, the mind turns inward. Thoughts revisit old conversations, decisions, and moments that once seemed small, but now carry emotional weight. This is where moral integrity becomes deeply important. Immanuel Kant understood that inner peace is not something added at the end of life. It is something revealed. Old age does not create regret. It uncovers what was already here. A person who repeatedly acted against their conscience may appear successful in earlier years, but when distractions disappear, unresolved guilt begins to surface. This inner conflict can disturb sleep, create anxiety, and quietly erode peace. Moral integrity protects the mind from this inner turmoil. When a person consistently acted according to principle, they do not need to justify their past. They do not argue with themselves in silence. Their mind is not divided. Kant believed that this unity of self is essential for peace. A divided self is always restless, while an integrated self is calm. In old age, peace comes not from pleasant memories alone, but from the absence of moral tension. Even difficult memories lose their sharpness when a person knows they acted with honesty and responsibility. Hard choices, sacrifices, and even failures feel lighter when they were guided by conscience rather than selfish impulse. Kant also believed that integrity strengthens trust in oneself. This self-trust becomes especially valuable in old age, when external guidance and control increase. Medical decisions, dependence on others, and vulnerability can create fear. A person who trusts their own moral character feels less threatened. They know who they are, regardless of changing circumstances. Another way moral integrity brings peace is through freedom from resentment. People who compromise their values often blame others later in life. They feel wronged, overlooked, or misunderstood. Kant believed this bitterness comes from inner inconsistency. When a person owns their choices and stands by their principles, resentment fades. Acceptance replaces blame. Peace in old age is also connected to how a person faces mortality. Kant did not frame death emotionally. He approached it rationally. A morally grounded person does not fear judgment in the same way, because their life was guided by duty rather than impulse. They may not know what lies ahead, but they feel at peace with what lies behind. Ultimately, moral integrity allows old age to become a time of quiet reconciliation. The person is reconciled with their past, their character, and their limits. They no longer struggle to defend themselves to the world or to their own memory. According to Kant, this inner harmony is one of the deepest forms of happiness a human being can experience. In this way, moral integrity does not just support happiness in old age. It becomes the peace that remains when everything else slowly falls away. The second pillar, self-discipline, Immanuel Kant viewed self-discipline not as restriction, but as a form of inner freedom. To many people, discipline sounds harsh or limiting. Kant believed the opposite. A person without discipline is constantly pulled by impulses, desires, and habits they did not consciously choose. Such a person may feel free in youth, but in old age, this lack of structure often turns into dependence, regret, and inner chaos. Self-discipline in Kant's field. Osophy is the ability to govern oneself through reason rather than impulse. It means choosing long-term well-being over short-term pleasure. This form of discipline creates a stable inner order that does not collapse when physical strength fades. In old age, when energy decreases and options narrow, this inner order becomes a powerful source of peace. Many of the struggles people face in later life come from habits formed earlier. Poor self-control can lead to health problems, financial stress, and emotional instability. Kant believed that discipline protects a person from becoming a prisoner of their own past choices. When a person lives with moderation and intentional habits, old age becomes simpler rather than heavier. Self-discipline also shapes how a person relates to desire. Kant did not argue against enjoyment, but he warned against being ruled by it. In old age, uncontrolled desire often turns into frustration because the body can no longer follow the mind's impulses. A disciplined person adjusts more easily. They do not feel deprived because they never defined happiness by excess. Another important aspect of self-discipline is mental strength. Kant believed that the mind, like the body, must be trained. A disciplined mind resists bitterness, self-pity, and envy. In old age, when comparison with younger generations can cause sadness, mental discipline allows acceptance instead of resentment. The person learns to observe thoughts rather than be consumed by them. F discipline also supports independence. Even when physical abilities decline, disciplined habits maintain dignity. Simple routines, personal care, and emotional regulation help an elderly person remain self-directed. Kant believed dignity comes from autonomy, and discipline preserves autonomy longer than strength ever could. Perhaps most importantly, self-discipline prepares a person for loss. Loss of status, loss of ability, and loss of loved ones are common in later life. A disciplined person does not collapse under these changes. They grieve, but they do not lose themselves. Their inner structure holds. According to Kant, self-discipline is not about denying life. It is about shaping life so that it remains livable at every stage. In old age, this pillar turns limitations into balance and restraint into peace. It allows a person to live gently, wisely, and with quiet control, even as the world around them continues to change. The third pillar, rational thinking. Immanuel Kant believed that rational thinking is one of the greatest strengths a human being possesses. For him, reason was not cold or heartless. It was the tool that allows a person to understand life clearly instead of being controlled by fear, illusion, or emotion. In old age, when uncertainty increases and the future feels shorter, rational thinking becomes especially important. As people grow older, many changes occur that are beyond personal control. The body weakens, memory shifts, and the world evolves in unfamiliar ways. Without rational thinking, these changes can feel threatening. Fear begins to dominate. Kant taught that reason helps a person distinguish between what can be changed and what must be accepted. This distinction alone brings calm. Rational thinking allows an elderly person to interpret aging not as failure, but as a natural process. Instead of asking why this is happening to me, the rational mind asks, how can I live well within these conditions? This shift in thinking prevents bitterness and self-pity. It turns attention toward adaptation rather than resistance. Kant also believed that reason protects the mind from exaggerated worries. In old age, thoughts about illness, dependence, and death often grow louder. Rational thinking brings proportion. It prevents the mind from catastrophizing the future. A rational person evaluates reality as it is, not as fear imagines it to be. This mental clarity reduces anxiety and creates emotional stability. Another important role of rational thinking is helping a person face mortality. Kant approached death without dramatic fear or denial. He believed that reflecting on life rationally allows a person to come to terms with its limits. A rational mind understands that finitude gives life meaning. In old age, this understanding brings seriousness, but also peace. Rational thinking also supports wisdom. Emotions fluctuate, but reason integrates experience into understanding. An elderly person guided by reason can offer insight without bitterness. They can reflect without clinging. Their advice comes from clarity rather than nostalgia. Kant believed this was one of the highest expressions of human maturity. Importantly, rational thinking does not mean suppressing emotion. Kant recognized emotion as part of human life, but reason prevents emotion from ruling decisions. In old age, emotional regulation becomes vital. Loss, loneliness, and change can overwhelm an undisciplined mind. Rational thinking steadies these feelings and keeps them in perspective. Ultimately, rational thinking allows an elderly person to remain inwardly free. Even when external freedom decreases, the mind stays sovereign. According to Kant, this inner freedom is the core of human dignity. It is what allows a person to age without fear, reflect without despair, and live their final years with clarity and calm. In this way, rational thinking does not remove the challenges of old age. It transforms how they are experienced, turning uncertainty into understanding and limitation into wisdom. The fourth pillar, inner worth over external success. Immanuel Kant believed that the true value of a human being does not come from achievements, possessions, or social recognition. It comes from dignity. This idea becomes especially important in old age, when many of the external markers of success begin to disappear. Careers end, titles lose their power, physical strength declines. For those who build their identity only on external success, this stage of life can feel empty and frightening. Kant argued that human worth is inherent. It does not increase with praise, nor does it decrease with age. Every person has value simply because they are a rational and moral being. In old age, when society often measures worth by productivity, this belief becomes a powerful source of inner stability. A person who understands their inner worth does not feel useless when they are no longer needed in the same way. Many elderly people suffer not from loneliness alone, but from a loss of identity. They ask themselves, who am I now that I am no longer working, providing, or leading? Kant's philosophy answers this clearly. You are still a person of dignity. Your value was never dependent on what you produced. This understanding protects the mind from despair and self-contempt. Inner worth also changes how a person experiences comparison. In later life, it is easy to compare oneself with younger generations or more successful peers. These comparisons often create bitterness or shame. Kant believed such comparisons are meaningless. Reason teaches that each stage of life has its own purpose. When a person accepts their inherent worth, comparison loses its power. Another important aspect of inner worth is how it shapes relationships. A person who knows their dignity does not beg for validation or fear abandonment. They engage with others freely, without desperation. In old age, this creates healthier relationships and reduces emotional dependence. Respect for oneself invites respect from others. Kant also connected inner worth to moral self-respect. A person who lived according to principle retains dignity even in weakness. They may need help, but they do not feel humiliated by it. Accepting care does not threaten their self-image because their worth is not tied to independence or control. In old age, inner worth becomes a shield against invisibility. Society may overlook the elderly. But the person who knows their value does not disappear inwardly. They remain present, grounded, and whole. According to Kant, this quiet self-respect is one of the deepest forms of happiness. By placing inner worth above external success, a person frees themselves from the fear of decline. Aging then becomes not a loss of value, but a return to what always mattered: dignity, reason, and moral presence. This is the fourth pillar that allows old age to be lived with calm, confidence, and grace. How these four pillars work together? Immanuel Kant did not see moral integrity, self-discipline, rational thinking, and inner worth as separate ideas. He understood them as parts of a single inner structure. Each pillar strengthens the others, and together they form a foundation that supports a peaceful and dignified old age. When one pillar is missing, the entire structure becomes unstable. When all four are present, life remains balanced even as external circumstances change. Moral integrity gives a person a clean relationship with their past. It allows reflection without shame and memory without regret. But integrity alone is not enough. Without self-discipline, good intentions often fail to turn into stable habits. Self-discipline transforms moral values into daily behavior. It protects integrity from being weakened by impulse or comfort. Rational thinking then provides clarity. It helps a person understand why discipline matters and when to apply it. Reason prevents rigidity and extremes. In old age, rational thinking allows adaptation. It helps a person adjust their discipline as the body changes and apply moral principles with wisdom rather than stubbornness. Inner worth ties everything together. Without a sense of inherent dignity, discipline can become harsh, reason can become cold, and morality can turn into self-punishment. Inner worth reminds a person that these pillars exist to support life, not to control it. It allows self-compassion without self-excuse. As people age, external supports naturally weaken. Social roles shrink. Physical abilities decline. Recognition becomes rare. This is when inner structure becomes more important than outer support. The four pillars work together to replace what is lost externally with strength that comes from within. For example, when illness limits independence, self-discipline maintains routine and care. Rational thinking accepts the limits without panic. Moral integrity prevents bitterness or blame. Inner worth ensures that dependence does not turn into humiliation. Each pillar answers a different challenge, but together they provide stability. Kant believed that happiness in old age is not excitement or pleasure. It is harmony. Harmony between thought and action, between memory and acceptance, between independence and humility. The four pillars create this harmony by aligning the inner life with reason and dignity. Another important aspect of these pillars working together is resilience. Life in old age often includes loss of loved ones, loss of strength, loss of certainty. A person supported by these four pillars grieves but does not collapse. Their grief has structure, their pain has meaning, their identity remains intact. When these pillars are lived over time, old age becomes a season of quiet authority, not authority over others but over oneself. The person does not need to prove anything anymore. Their life speaks for itself through consistency, calm, and presence. According to Kant, this inner coherence is one of the highest achievements of a human life. It cannot be taken away by age, illness, or time. When the four pillars stand together, old age is no longer feared. It becomes the natural completion of a life lived with intention and respect for oneself. Immanuel Kant never promised that life would become easy with age. He did not offer guarantees of comfort, pleasure, or constant happiness. What he offered was something far more lasting, a way of living that allows a person to meet old age without fear, without bitterness, and without losing themselves. His philosophy reminds us that the final years of life are not meant to be escaped or denied, but understood and lived with clarity. Old age reveals what a person has built within. When external supports fall away, the inner life becomes visible. This is why Kant's 4 pillars matter so deeply. They are not strategies for success, they are foundations for peace. A person who has lived with moral integrity does not need to defend their past. A person who practiced self-discipline does not feel lost without constant stimulation. A person guided by reason does not panic in the face of change. A person who knows their inner worth does not feel diminished by age. Together, these pillars create a form of happiness that does not depend on circumstances. This happiness is quiet. It does not seek attention. It is felt in the absence of inner conflict, in the ability to sit with oneself without restlessness, in the strength to accept help without shame, in the courage to face the unknown without denial. Kant believed that the highest achievement of a human life is not fame or pleasure, but dignity. Dignity that remains even when the body weakens. Dignity that does not need validation. In old age, this dignity becomes visible in how a person speaks, listens, and reflects. Their presence carries weight, not because of authority, but because of coherence. This philosophy also changes how we think about time. Old age is often seen as an ending. NT invites us to see it as a completion, not a loss of value, but a gathering of meaning. When life has been lived according to principle and reason, the final years are not empty, they are full of understanding. For those who are younger, Kant's message is both a warning and an invitation. The future is not shaped only by chance. It is shaped by daily choices. The way you act now becomes the way you rest later. Old age begins much earlier than we think. In the end, Kant's 4 pillars offer something rare in modern life. A vision of aging that is not driven by fear. A way to grow older without growing smaller inside. When these principles guide a life, old age becomes a quiet victory. A time when nothing needs to be proven and nothing essential is missing. This is the happiness Kant believed in. Not loud, not temporary, but steady, dignified, and deeply human.